Do this. Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Lamed Beis. We're starting at a fresh Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis, 5 lines from the bottom, and we will be stopping about 8 lines from the bottom of Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis, we'll learn one whole Mishnah in Gemara, and we will begin a new sugya as well. Zeh babe chaviso. One person is carrying his barrel of wine. V'zeh babe koraso, and another person is carrying a beam. Pretty bad combination of things. Nishbara kado shel zeh bekoraso shel zeh. If the two clank together and the pitcher breaks, putter. Everybody's putter. The Baal Korah who's carrying that which caused the damage, he's putter. Everyone has permission to be there. You're in a public domain. Everyone assumes, I'm going to speak in our legal language, everyone assumes a certain level of risk. When they're in a public domain, you're driving a car, you're assuming a certain level of risk. When two people assume the same amount of risk in that they're both going into Rishus Harabim, so the Mishnah holds, everybody's put there if there's like routine damages. No one's intentional, no one did anything wrong. It was an accident, everybody's putter. That is the ratio. Here's the second case. Haya bal hakore rishon. Let's say the guy holding the beam on his shoulder is first. Ubal chavis acharon. And the person holding the barrel is after him. Last line of Lamed Aleph Amid Beis. Nishbara chavis bekora. If the barrel breaks against the korah, let's remember, I'm carrying the barrel first. I'm carrying a beam on my shoulder, and you're walking behind me with your barrel, and it breaks. We assume that I, the Baal HaKorah, is Pater Baal HaKorah. The Rishonim explain that we assume that the person with the Baal HaChavis sped up a little bit, and he was the one who was actually at fault. And on the top of Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, the opposite case is also true. V'im amad Baal HaKorah chayev. If the Baal HaKorah stood still, I'm first, and I just stop walking, and my stopping to walk led you to walk your barrel straight into the beam that I'm holding, and it breaks your barrel. Chayev, the Baal HaKorah, I who stopped short, that's going to be my obligation. V'imamar lebal chavis amod. But if I, as the Baal Korah, was stopping, and I call out behind me, I need to stop. Fair warning, everyone behind me should also stop, but the guy behind me doesn't listen, and the barrel breaks against the Korah, the halacha is pater, because I did my fair part. I announced out loud that I need you to stop because I have to stop. All is well and good.
Is there a difference in the order of who's walking first?
That's the next case. Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, second line. Haya bal chavis rishon. Let's say the person carrying the barrel is walking first. Ubal hakoreh acharon, and the person carrying the beam is now walking behind. Nishbara chavis bekoreh chayev. If the chavis breaks on the beam, so then chayev, the Baal HaKorah is chayev. We assume, just like we did on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, we assume that the person behind kind of sped up a little bit without care. V'im amad bal chavis pater. If the person in front, the one who's carrying the barrel, stops short, and because he stopped short, the person behind him holding the beam kept walking, and the beam breaks the barrel, the halacha is pater. The Baal HaKorah is going to be pater because the person in front of him stopped short. V'im amar lebal koreh amod chayev. If the first person who was if the first person who was the Baal HaChavis knew he was going to stop, and he called out to the Baal HaKorah behind him and said, Baal Korah, Amod, don't walk because I need to stop. And then he continues to walk and he breaks the barrel from behind. The din is chayev. And now we would just apply these rules out to other cases as well. That brings us to the Gemara. And the Gemara is seemingly out of left field, but we will soon see a very quick connection to our Gemara. The Gemara asks about a woman who's injured during Tashmish Hamita. The Gemara says, Ba mine Rabba bar Nosan me Rav Huna. Hamazik es ishto b'tashmish hamita mahu. How do we treat damages, nizikin, between a husband and a wife during Tashmish Hamita if the man injures his wife? Do we say that kevan debir shus ka'avid pater, since it's permissible for them to be together, again, an assumption of risk, do we therefore assume that because it's possible that a woman could get injured during Tashmish Hamita, she knew the risks, he knew the risks, therefore pater? O dilma, or perhaps would we say iboile le'iyune, that really he's chayev because he should have been ma'ayin, he should have been more careful. So this, the Gemara says, Amar le, Rav Huna says back to Rabba Bar Nasan, Tani Tuha. We already learned this. Where did we learn this? In our very own Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. Let's review the question. A husband inadvertently injures his wife during Tashmish Shamita. What's the din? The Gemara says, Tanitua, we learned it. We're 10 lines down. What does our Mishnah say? Shelazeh rishus lahalech, vilazeh rishus lahalech. Just like we said in our Mishnah, in the first case of our Mishnah, the Mishnah at the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis says that if I, who am carrying a barrel, and you who are carrying a beam are walking in the same place, we're walking at the same time, and we clank into each other, and the barrel breaks, the din is that the balakor is potter. What was the svara of the Mishnah? The Mishnah said this line, that because each person is allowed to be in the Rishus Harabim, so therefore you can't hold either person more liable than the other, and therefore everyone's potter. And the Gemara tries, in the name of Rav Huna, tries to apply this din to our case of a husband who, what was the line? Maseches ishto betashmish shamita mahu. We would say he's potter because shelazeh rishus lahalech. Vilazeh rishus lahalech. This is a permissible activity that two.
In a different case, where he was really masked, like he wasn't careful, meaning kosher kansi kana isha kana bal, right? If she gets proceeds, it's like what is the case in which you would be chayav because you tripped your wife?
I'm saying if you're a mazik, if you're intentionally trying to harm her, then you're a mazik. That's pasha. That's pasha.
Because the
that's a tashlumin question. I don't know. I think you have to. This question
is a tashlumin question.
Yeah,
in
a chanami, it's a tashlumin question.
This is not. But
yeah, this is
not
not.
a question.
You're right. It is. Let's go. We just asked a question 5 seconds ago. We got to give a chance to chew on the question a little bit. We're good.
Are we talking about wedding night or
no? Bichlal not. No, that's nothing. Nothing you do about that. That's just the nature of things. That's expected by her too.
I mean, okay, so he trips her and he was a mazik.
Intentionally?
Even if it's a jerk,
right?
Leaving aside,
the Gemara says that there's some way. From the Gemara's language, it seems pretty pashut, at least from the Chakira, when it says, "Do we say iboy le'iyune?" Yeah, it could be to her yorshim. It could be added to I don't know. It's a good question on what the Metzias is. I for sure am. Let's not set the bar in the wrong place. Okay, so Lemay said there is a chiyuv. If there is a chiyuv, he has to pay her. I don't know.
Conversation. I just wonder where the one would go.
I have some faint recollections that we've discussed things like this. Like she can have, like nichse malug and nichse son barza. There are things that she brings into the marriage in the chanami. Right.
So to speak.
So that's only assuming that
it's different. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe this is then considered an asset, not an income.
Yeah. Somewhere in that space is somewhere. We can look it up afterwards because it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch, I believe. Yeah, it's quoted in the Tur Shulchan Aruch, Choshen Mishpat, Tav Chaf Aleph, Yud Beis.
If I stop talking about time.
Yeah. And if not, Michael's going to leave. So then we'll have time to stop talking, just continue talking. It's fine. All right. So the Gemara answers, no, don't worry. That's what Rav Huna says, that he's putter because this is an activity that they both are, it's shelazeh v'shelazeh. They're both involved in the same activity. And there's an understanding, again, a minimum assumption of risk when you're involved in an activity. I play in the Torah softball league. People get injured every single year. One guy got hit by a ball catching it. His whole nail fell off. He broke his finger. Another guy, my brother-in-law, bless his heart, he tore his ACL, had a massive knee surgery 4 years ago. Every year, some guy, things happen. What, they sue the league? No, you don't sue the league. There's an assumption of risk. So with Tashma Shemitah, there's an assumption of risk under normal behavior. Again, we're not talking about mazik. We're talking about a case of unintentional nezik. Rava will hear nothing of it. Rava disagrees with Rav Huna, quarter of the way down. Omar Rava kal b'chomer. I disagree. Uma ya'ar, and when we talk about a forest over here, we're talking about the pasuk in Sefer Dvarim. V'nashal habarzel min ha'etz. When a person is using an axe and the head of the axe, the actual metal part, flies off the handle while you're swinging back or possibly forward. I believe that's a discussion in the Gemara, and then it kills someone. So that has its own din. Let's analyze. Just like in a ya'ar, where that case of a v'nashal habarzel min ha'etz applies, shezer l'rishuso nichnas, v'zel l'rishuso nichnas, there nasa k'misha nichnas l'rishus chavero v'chayev. In such a case, we say that it's as if the person who was v'nashal habarzel, that it's as if he entered into the rishus of his chaver and he's chayev to go to galus or whatever the punishment is. Zeh shel rishus chavero nichnas lo kol shekain. So by the case of an ashal habarzel, they're both in a yar, which really is public property, but we halachically assume that it was as though the accidental murder was where the mazik entered into the product, the location of the nizak. Then our case of tashmish amita, zeh rishus chavero mamish, he's physically in her space. So why then would we not say anything other than that? Lo kol shekain. All the more so, he should be held accountable for the damages. He completely disagrees with Rav Huna fundamentally. And Rava says our Mishnah has no shaychus to the case that was asked. We asked about Maseches ishto betashmish. Rav Huna said, don't worry, our Mishnah. Rava's like, what are you talking about? We have a kal v'chomer from Ya'ar. So then what would Rava say? How does Rava distinguish between our Mishnah and this case over here? So Hasam says the Gemara, Tarvaihu kihadade ninu. Hasam, what does Hasam mean? Rashi at the top of the page. Dibur hamasil tarvaihu kihadade ninu. Shnehen shavin b'shvirasa. Both of them are equal in regards to breaking, referring to the case of the Baal HaChavis and the Baal HaKoresh. Sha'af Baal HaChavis sayeya b'shvirasa. Both of them played a role. That's what Rava wants to say. But Hacha, by Tashmish Amita, Ihu Ka'avid Maisa. He is the one who is active and causing damage. So therefore, says Rava, you cannot compare our Mishnah, which speaks about this din of Shelazerishus Lahalich, Velazerishus Lahalich, where both the Baal Chavis and the Baal Kone and the Baal Kore, are playing an active role in the damage. Masha Ein Kain in Tashmish Amita, she is not playing an active role in the damage. Says the Gemara Vehilo, is she not considered an active member of Tashmish Amita? V'aksiv. We know that when it comes to certain onshin, the pasuk says V'nichresu hanifashos ha'osos mikerav amam, that there are times in certain realms of Tashmish Amita where there's kares for those who are osos, those who are involved in the action of Tashmish Amita. So how can you say, Rava, that the case of Tashmish Amita is not comparable to our Mishnah? You wanted to argue that Tashmish Amita was more one-sided and our case was more equal involvement. So the Gemara, based on the psukim, seems to say not like that. Rava says, don't worry. Hana letarvaihu islahu. You're right that both he and she will have a hana on Tashmish Amita. But ihu maisahu dekavi. We assume that he is more active or he is active and she is not. Discussions over here as to what this actually means. And therefore, the Gemara says, Rava says, I will hear nothing of it. So Lamaisa, we have a machlokes Rav Huna and Rava in regards to a husband who is mazik his wife during Tashmish Amita. Rav Huna, based on our Mishnah, is poter, and Rava, based on the Kal V'chomer from Ya'ar, is mechayev. Fascinating machlokas. Terrible marriage, because that means she's taking him to Bezdin and saying, listen, just letting you know, he's chayev tashlumin. So Rav Huna says, no, he's poter, because shelazerishus in that place and lazerishus. Rava says, no, Kal V'chomer from Ya'ar. There we made a halachic assumption that because the mazik was ki'ilu, he was nichnas into the rishus of the nizak, so too over here.
Please suppose that it's a consensual act. It's not I don't know if you call a husband onus, but
I mean, you can be ma'anis someone. I don't know how it works halachically, but I don't know.
But
The one exception to that rule is yibum, where that's even in Baal Korcha.
Right, but this presupposes, without any question, that it's.
I'm under an assumption that we're under relatively normal circumstances. Yeah, I'm under the assumption. The mitzvah of ona is not a right for the husband; it's a right for the isha.
It's an obligation.
Well, unless she's mochelas, and when you're being violated, you're typically not interested. So then the mitzvah goes away. The mitzvah pasha dissolves. It's probably one of the only traditions under the sun that has such a thing. where the right of intimacy is a woman's right and not a man's right. Afal, let's be clear that the mitzvah of prurvu, according to many Rishonim, belongs to men and not to women. The Gemara has machlokes tanaim about that. We've learned it before. So just a unique balancing act, and that's why you want to have shalom bayis, so that there's kind of a be'izun. Everyone's in balance. Everyone understands what's happening. But it seems from the Gemara, though I couldn't say for certain, that we're only talking about a case where everything was consensual, and just Nebuch, unfortunately, she got hurt and she's upset and she wants to be paid. She wants money. All right, 1/3 of the way down, the second of the wide lines, Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Let's continue analyzing. We had a case in our Mishnah that's quoted here, Hayabal Kore Rishon. That was case number 2 in our Mishnah, where the person carrying the beam was walking first, and the person carrying the barrel was walking second. Says the Gemara, Amar Reish Lakish, we have a case from Reish Lakish that we've seen a couple of times already, and we're going to see if it can be connected to our Mishnah. What was the case? Shtei paros birshus harabim. A person has 2 cows that are walking birshus harabim, but then one of them sits down in the middle of the rishus harabim. Achas revutza, ve'achas mehalechas. One animal starts to crouch down and sits down in the middle of Tui Avenue, and the other is mehaleches, and the other animal keeps walking. Ba'ata mehaleches biravutza petura. If the animal that is walking decides to kick the animal that's crouching, the din is that it's petura. However, revutza b'mehaleches, if the animal that's crouching down, honestly, comedically, sticks out one of its front legs and trips the animal that's walking, the halacha is chayeves. Okay, so the Baal, the owner of the animal that's revutza, that trips the animal who is regular, so then the Baal haravutza is chayev to pay the Baal maleches. What does the Gemara want to know? Leima misayele. Perhaps our Mishnah is a raya to the shita of Rav Ashi. And the Gemara says 4 lines into the wide lines, which Mare Makom in our Mishnah aligns with the shita of Reish Lakish? The Gemara says, Hayabal Kore Rishon, that's case number 2 in our Mishnah, which is 2 lines from the bottom on Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. Hayabal Kore Rishon, Ubal Chavis Achron, if the person carrying the beam was first, and the person carrying the barrel was last. Nishbera Chavis Bekora, we said that if the barrel breaks on the beam pater, that the Baal HaKoreh is pater. We also had said that V'im Amad Baal Koreh Chayev, that if the first person, the Baal Koreh, stopped in his tracks, and therefore the barrel breaks on the beam, the halacha is that the Baal HaKoreh is going to be chayev. The halacha, in our case, where we see that the Baal HaKoreh is going to be chayev when he stops short, that's similar to the case of the chiravutza b'mehaleches v'katani chayev. So perhaps the case where the ravutza is tripping the animal that's mehaleches is similar to the case of Amad Baal Koreh. Says the Gemara, v'tizbara, is that even logical to say? Hasiyu abaya, you're trying to say that our Mishnah is a help, is an asset to try and support the Shita of Rav Ashi? It's the exact opposite. Halfway down on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Lo mistaya de lo misaye. It's not enough that your Mare Makom isn't helping to prove Rav Ashi. Ela makshanami kasha. You did a terrible job of finding a Mare Makom. And the reason why is because of as follows. Time, what was true about the case of Rav Ashi, de ba'ata, was because the animal was being kicked. Ha'huz kamemela. But if an animal wasn't being kicked, and let's say somebody tripped on the ravutza, somebody tripped on the crouching animal, so then the din is pater and not chayev. V'hamas nisen de memela v'katani chayev. In our case in the Mishnah was a case of memela, where something happened kind of on its own in motion. The barrel broke by motion, and it wasn't something that was ba'ata. No one was actively trying to kick or to damage. And there, v'katani chayev. So the Gemara says, you tried to bring a raya from our Mishnah from Rav Ashi. You are completely off the mark. Completely off the mark. So says the Gemara, Masnisin de Pascha le'orcha kishilda. Our Mishnah is dealing with a case where it was a little bit more hands-on damage, where the person walking in front was holding the beam, and we had this language of kishilda yesterday. It's called like a corpse. The word kishilda means a corpse. And just like yesterday, when we were discussing that case, the corpse was lying across the Rishus Harabim. Here too, instead of holding the barrel, holding the koreh front to back, I turned sideways and blocked the road. And that's when all the damage happened. So that's why the Gemara says, your question's not so strong, but nevertheless, your point is still accurate. And then hacha, but in our case, kigon de rava bechad gisa, where the animal crouched on one side, but ibayle liskuye beidach gisa, but there was actually room for the person to walk on the other side. So therefore, this part of the Mishnah is not a huge problem for Reish Lakish, but it's also not a question, not a support for Reish Lakish. The Gemara then says, but wait, there's more in our Mishnah. Perhaps the end of our Mishnah is a support for Reish Lakish. Which part of our Mishnah and which part of Reish Lakish? The Katani, our Mishnah had said, Hayabal Chavis Rishon. That's the third case, which is on the top of this page, on the second line. Hayabal Chavis Rishon Ubal Kore Acharon. The person holding the barrel was first in line. The person holding the beam was second in line. Nishbera Chavis Bekore Chayiv. The person whose barrel broke, so then the Baal Korah is going to be Chayiv because we assume the Baal Korah kept walking without stopping and he's Chayiv. Bim Amad Baal Chavis Pater. And if person number one, who's holding the barrel, he's holding the barrel on his shoulder, nice and tall, and he stops short. And then from behind, you see this beam going straight through the barrel because the guy stopped short. So then Pashat, the Baal Korah is going to be Pater in such a case. So the Gemara says 3 lines before the Mishnah, and we're 2/3 of the way down. This case, where the Baal HaChavis was Amad and Pater, that sounds like it's similar to the case of Mehaleches Beravusa, where an animal that's walking kicked an animal that's lying down, and we see in that case, in the case of Ravashi, a Reish Lakish, that you're Pater. So says the Gemara, Mas Nisan dechi urche kamaske. In our Mishnah, the person was doing nothing out of the ordinary. He was just walking. But hacha, in regards to the case of Reish Lakish, Amarle nihidi islach reshus liskuye alai. Okay, you could say about the Ravutza, okay, you can step over me, but you can't kick me. Levaute bi les lach reshusa. You have no right to kick me, and therefore the cases are not really comparable, and therefore we can't learn anything from our Mishnah in regards to the Shita of Reish Lakish, and there's therefore no comparison between our Mishnah and Reish Lakish. The Gemara says at the new Mishnah, 2 people are traveling together in Reshus HaRabim. Echad rotz ve'echad mahalech. One person is running and one person is walking. I'm imagining the scene on the side of the JCC pool in the early 1980s when someone would scream and say, please don't walk on the side of the pool, or in any other pool I've ever been in for that matter, because kids run next to pools. So what happens if one person is running and one person is walking? Oh, shnehem ratzin, or if both of them are running, and then vehiziku zeh zeh, and then they bump into each other and they both need stitches. The din is shnehem p'tur. We assume that running in Reshus HaRabim is not a normal behavior. In America, that's not true. In America, we have people who jog all the time. I would probably argue what's a little abnormal is those electric bikes that are on sidewalks. That might be already a real sugya of ratz and mahalech, because that's not a normal behavior. And if you're misbehaving, then that's a whole different ballgame. So therefore, the Gemara says if even one person is running, that's already a new league of misbehavior. And the Gemara opens up 10 lines or so from the bottom. What?
Comes out still Paturim.
It comes out still Paturim. Well, we're going to discuss this in the Gemara. That's what Rashi says, Kedim Mefarish Gemara. He's foreshadowing our concern that one person is behaving normally and one person is behaving abnormally. So the Gemara says, first of all, Masnisan Deloki Isi ben Yehuda. Our Mishnah cannot be authored by the Tana of Isi ben Yehuda. Why not? The Tanya. Isi ben Yehuda Omer, Ratz Chayev Mipnei Shumeshuna. So this is exactly the opposite of our Mishnah and fairly intuitive. The guy who's running is doing something he should not be doing. Why would our Mishnah say you're Pater? Isi ben Yehuda calls it out and says, you're Chayev. So says the Gemara, but Umode Isi be'erev Shabbos bein hashmashos shehu pater. However, Isi ben Yehuda agrees that on erev Shabbos during bein hashmashos, let's listen to the timing. We're going to question this later. You're allowed to run on Shabbos bein hashmashos, and if you do and injure someone, you're pater. Isi ben Yehuda's matir. So he has 2 modes. He has running is considered meshuna and you're chayev, except for erev Shabbos bein hashmashos. Mibnei sheratz birshus. Because apparently when a person runs during Bein Hashmashos, they are doing so with permission. Amar Rav Yochanan says, Halacha ki isi ben Yehuda. So now Rav Yochanan has a little bit of a problem because our Mishnah is a Stam Mishnah. And Isi ben Yehuda is a named brisa. Umi Amar Rav Yochanan Hachi. How can Rav Yochanan side with Isi ben Yehuda? Because by doing so, he's ignoring another one of his principles. The Amar Rav Yochanan halacha kistam mishnah vitznan echad ratz ve'echad mahalech o shahayu shneim ratzin pturim. We know from Rabbi Yochanan that he typically holds of anonymous mishnayos. Our mishnah right here, 2/3 of the way down, is anonymous. It says that a person whose rutz is going to be pater. Isi ben Yehuda says a person whose rutz is going to be chayiv, with the exception of Erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos. And then Rabbi Yochanan says the halacha is like Isi ben Yehuda. That's a stira. You can't say the halacha is like Isi ben Yehuda when you're Rabbi Yochanan, because we have a stam mishnah that disagrees. And now the Gemara says, don't worry, everything is all fine and good. Says the Gemara, Masnisin be'erev. We're answering from left field. We'll come back around. Everything will make sense soon. Masnisin be'erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos. We had said that in the name of Isi ben Yehuda that he was talking about a case of erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos. Rav Yochanan says our Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down, is talking about a case of running an erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos. Look at our Mishnah. Do you see Shabbos? Do you see Erev Shabbos? Do you see Ben Hashmashos? Nothing. Our Mishnah seems to be talking about regular, not anything else. No distinctions at all. Mimai. How does Rav Yochanan know that our Mishnah is discussing a case of Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos? Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom, because midikatani. O shahayu shnehen ratzim pturim. We have an extraneous line in our Mishnah. If our Tana in our Mishnah holds that when one person runs your putter because his behavior is odd, then if 2 people are running, all the more so. Why do I need that extra line? Hasu lamali. I don't need that extra line. And hashta echad ratz ve'echad mahalech pater shneim ratzin mibaya. And the Gemara just explicitly calls out the question. Why does our Mishnah have that extra line that if both of them were running v'hiziku zeh that they're going to be pater? I could have made that kal v'chomer on my own. Says the Gemara, Elahachi Ka'amar. This is the right way to read our Mishnah, even though not all of these words are found in our Mishnah. We're 4 lines from the bottom. Elahachi Ka'amar. Echad ratz ve'echad mahalech pater. When one person is running and one person is walking and they damage each other, there's a ptur from damages. When do we say that a person is going to be pater when one is running and the other is walking? That's be'erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos, because as we saw earlier, there's a reshus to run in ben Hashmashos. We're going to talk about that soon. Aval b'chol echad ratz ve'echad mahalech chayev. Shnein ratzin afilu b'chol pturim. And now, what do we have? We have this beautiful stitched, wonderful embroidered picture of our Mishnah blended with Isi ben Yehuda. There's no stira with Isi ben Yehuda. That's how we started. Lema, perhaps we should say that Masnisin is the Loki Isi ben Yehuda. The answer is that our Mishnah is authored by Isi ben Yehuda. We're just missing some information that Rav Yochanan clears up for us. No stira. Amar Mar, but we do still have to analyze what is going on with this Erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos din. We had learned we had said that a person is allowed to run on Erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos, and if damages are caused during this time, if one person's running and one person's walking, you're going to be pater because there's reshus. Says the Gemara, Erev Shabbos, my birshus ika. What are we talking about when we say that there is reshus? By the way, some of the Meforshim take out the language here of Erev Shabbos. If you look in the Hagos V'Tzionim, it says Bekisve Yad, and I don't know what that stands for. Beis Aleph Gimel Hey Sav Leisa be'erev Shabbos, but I don't know why it's problematic. It might just not have been printed, but it is what Isi ben Yehuda wrote. So I'm not sure if the word detracts from what the Gemara meant to do, or if it just wasn't copied right. I don't know, but the Gemara says, "My birshus ika." Says the Gemara, why is a person running at that time at Bein Hashmashos? Kidder Reb Chanina, for a beautiful hashkafic reason. To Amar Reb Chanina, top of Lamed Beis and Med Beis, the Gemara says that at that time, Bo'u v'neitze likras kala malkusa. Rashi, Bo'u v'neitze, let's go out, ka'adam hamakabel pnei hamelech, like a person would go out to greet a king who is on their way to their town. We would line the streets with people. If you could imagine, again, we only have one dogma of this that's even normal, which is the monarchy in England, that when the Queen of England was alive, now the king, when he walks down the street, people are all lined up. They've got barricades, they've got police on horses, all the costume. there's a chashivus. So says the Gemara, no different. We should be engaging Shabbos in the same way. That's when a person is allowed to run. You're allowed to run to shul on Friday night to say, Bo v'netze likras kala malkasa. V'amrila likras Shabbos kala malkasa, differences in language. And Rav Yanai misate fikai, he would wrap himself up in some head garb and he would go out. V'amar, he would say, Boi kala, boi kala. Now you know where the language comes from that we have in the Chadodi that Rav Alkabetz wrote. He pulled it from Gemara, Maseches Bava Kama Lamed Beis Amid Beis, of boi chala, boi chala. That's when you're allowed to run. And l'chora, that's ladina. A person's allowed to run. In general, on Shabbos, we have very few times that we can run. You can be ratz lepirka, you can run to go learn Torah, you can run to shul, but you're not supposed to be running in general. And you're also allowed to run on Friday night in order to be makabel the pnei hashchina, to be makabel the Shabbos kala, which also means you're probably late to shul because it means you miss mincha in our world because we dive in mincha later in the day.
Some people don't know.
That's correct. But whenever I'm running on Friday afternoon, it's because I miss mincha. For me, I'm not saying you guys. I'm just calling out.
Exercise either.
What?
Don't do exercise either if you're running.
What?
Running is exercise.
Yeah. It's mutter. It's mutter to run here. That's what the Gemara is saying. It's mutter to run, to be bovenetze likras kala. That's allowed.
Yeah, but that's what's that.
Although you can't just stom exercise. I've seen this in other communities here in the Chicagoland area where people on Yontif are like pashut in shorts and a t-shirt jogging. Why is that okay? Even if it's mutter, yeah. No tzitzis, no kippah, is not mutter. And even if it's mutter, it's asur. Okay, the next Mishnah says, Hamivakea, a person is cutting wood. You've seen the scene. A person's holding an axe and they have a massive tree stump and they take smaller blocks of wood. They take their axe and they crack down the piece of wood into smaller pieces. Now, if they do so birshus harabim, which is not a normal place to break wood, v'hizik birshus hayachid, and something splinters off into a private piece of property, or birshus hayachid, you're breaking the wood in private property, v'hizik birshus harabim, and the splinters fly out into the public domain. In fact, according to the commentaries here, these first two cases are reversed because the Gemara's presentation of these cases is like the reversal. And lastly, birshus hayachid, v'hizik birshus hayachid acher, in all three cases, the halacha is that you are chayev. That is what the Gemara says. What's missing? From Rishus Harabim to Rishus Harabim. L'chora, that's pashat that you're chayav, no? The Gemara doesn't discuss it.
What's the difference between that? You're outside.
It might be pashat, but why do we ever list three cases in this case? That's the Gemara's first sugya, is vitzricha. The Gemara says we need all these cases. I'm just raising the question. I didn't even think about it before. The Gemara gives three permutations. There was a fourth that was ignored. We did Rishus Yachid to Rishus Harabim, Rishus Harabim to Rishus Yachid, and Rishus Yachid to Rishus Yachid, but not Rishus Harabim to Rishus Harabim. But it must just be pasha. The Gemara says vitzricha. We need all three cases. Ti'itana hamevakeh birshus hayachid v'hizik birshus harabim. That's now you know that our Mishnah should have been in a different order because the word hamevakeh. What's the next word? Birshus harabim. But in the Gemara it says hamevakeh birshus hayachid. So the cases in our Mishnah were written reversed in our typeset. It's incorrect. So the Gemara says, if I only had taught the case in our Mishnah of where I'm cutting wood in private property and a splinter goes off into public property and damages, there I might have thought you're chayav mishum deshchichi rabim, because there's more people in Rishus Harabim and I should have been more careful to stand 1 foot away from the Rishus Harabim. Aval, perhaps I might have argued that may Rishus Harabim the Rishus hayachid lo shchichi rabim meimalo. I might have thought that if the splinter goes off into private property where there's far fewer people, that I shouldn't have to be concerned. Therefore, we needed that case to be taught. If you say that when you're breaking wood in Rishus Harabim and then a splinter goes off and injures or kills someone in Rishus Hayachid, so the problem is that you're starting off in the wrong place. You're not allowed to do that there. That's shelo birshus avid. You're not allowed to do that in that space. You can't break wood with an axe in public. But where I'm in private property and it's permissible for me to cut wood, so then if it happens to accidentally splinter out into Rishus HaRabim, I might have thought you're patur, kamash malan. If we had these two cases, one case where you are doing the damage in Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, and there's people there, and the other where you're doing the damage in Rishus HaYachid, but you did so be'isr because it's shelo b'rishus. Aval, perhaps I would have thought that the case of me Rishus HaYachid, the Rishus HaYachid acher to lo shchichi rabim umeikar b'rishus emalo tzricha. So we need all of these cases. That's what the Gemara says. This is going to be our last sugya for today, and it's going to take us to the end of the day today. We're actually going to be stopping in the middle of the sugya because it doesn't really end to the next Mishnah. And that's not happening tonight. So the Gemara says the third of the way down on Lamed Beis and Beis Tanu Rabbanan. Hanichnas lechanuso shel nagar shelo birshus. If I go into the store of a carpenter, a woodworker, and I do so without permission, bikas v'tipcha al panav b'meis pater, and I get a splinter. A person gets a splinter in their head, and it ends up killing them. They get a hit with a log in the head, and they die. The Baal hachanus is pater. If I am the person who's the Baal HaChanus, I own the store, I'm the woodworker, and I know you're standing there and you're watching, and then you get hurt from an accident, then I am chayev because I knew you were there and I let you walk in the store. So what does it mean that you're chayev? Says the Gemara, my chayev. You're obligated in Daled Dvarim, which we've spoken about, Tsari, Poi, Boshes, and Sheves. You're obligated in those four things, but you're pater from Galus. Why are you pater from Galus? So the Gemara says, let's review the case of where we're even entertaining Galus. We're thinking about Galus in this case where I work in a woodworking shop. I let you into my store, and as I work, the person gets injured. And then the Gemara is debating my level of chiyuv. The Gemara says, I'm chayev on daled dvarim, but pater from galus. What's the svara? Lefi she'ein domeh leya'ar. This is not similar enough to the case of ya'ar, where there is a din of galus. Ya'ar zeh l'rshuso nichnas, v'zeh l'rshuso nichnas. In regards to a ya'ar, both people entered the space in just the right way. What was the case that we were talking about? We said that we were talking about if a person is nichnas birshus, zel rishus chover nichnas. So you knew what was going on. It's not exactly the same thing. You're at a higher level of chiyuv. Omar Rava, possibly Rabba. The Hagos Habach changes it, but the Hagos V'Tziyonim don't. So not sure. The Gemara says halfway down, 4 lines before the wide lines on Lamed Beis and Beis. Omar Rava kal v'chomer. In a forest, I'm going there with my axe to cut a tree. You're going there to walk your dog. Then it's as if you knew that I was gonna hurt you, and then there's a din of galus. And when I let you into my store and cause the damage, all the more so that there should be a din of galus. How can it be that Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina is saying that you're pater from galus? So Rava turns the tables in a shocking way. Let's review the case first and then listen to Rava's answer. Rava is the case that we're dealing with is where I let you into my store. I am a woodworker, and you get damaged by the work that I do. So we say that if, God forbid, a person gets killed in this woodworking shop when the owner let them in, we say that the Baal HaChanus is Chai B'Dal Dvarim, but pater from Galus. So Ela Amar Rava, last short line, my pater mi Galus. What was the case where we say you're pater from Galus? The lo sagile begalus, because Galus isn't enough. When do we have Galus? That's in pure shogeg cases. This is not pure shogeg. The Hainu Taima de Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Mishum de Havale Shogeg Karav Lemezid. In a case of Shogeg Karav Lemezid, you don't get to go to Galus. Shogeg Karav Lemezid is a very bad form of shogeg where it's really not pure accident. You let something happen. Yes, your activity was an accident, but the scenario you created wasn't an accident. I let you into the store. So I'm culpable on a higher level than a typical shogeg. It's more negligent. It's not mazid, because I didn't want that person to get hurt. I didn't even expect that the piece of wood would fly the way that it did and injure and kill. but because I let you into the store, I'm more responsible. And that case is called shogeg karav lemezid. And seemingly, in the case of shogeg karav lemezid, you do not go to galus because you're too culpable. Are you a murderer? The Gemara doesn't say. The Gemara asks two questions on this. Masiv Rava. Here's question number one. Let's say in regards to a case of malkos, the Bezdin is meting out lashes to a person. Hosif lo ritzua achas umeis. Let's say that the executioner, well, I should say the malkos person, because he's not meant to kill people. The person giving malkos gives one lash too many, hare and the umeis, and the person dies. The victim dies. Hare ze gole al yado. That person gets to go to galus. But why? Why does he get to go to galus? That's not different than our case of the carpenter. He should have paid more attention to make sure that this guy won't die with this one extra lash. So what we see is against Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. We thought that when Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said that you're patur from galus when I let you into the store and that person gets injured, that's because it's shogeg karav lemezid. And in the case of shogeg karav lemezid, you don't get to go to galus. You're too culpable. You're too responsible. So, but we see a case over here. I literally hit you with a lash and you died. No case is more typical of shogeg what's the language? Shogeg karav lemezid. So why would we say hareze gola? So Amar of Simi min harda the tay v'minyana. The case over there was where they made a mistake in the counting. Rava was sitting at the table with him. He kicked him under the table. Says the Gemara, tafach le Rava bisandale. Rava kicks under. He's like, what are you talking about? That's not how things work. Amar le atu hu money. The guy who's doing the lashes is not the one who counts. There's a whole system in place. V'hatanya. Gadol shebedayanan kore. The person who is the greatest of the dayanim, he reads out the punishment. V'hasheni moneh. A second guy is the one who does the counting. You can give him 3 lashes. And v'hashlishi omer hiko. The third guy says, hit him. And the fourth guy hits him. But the guy who hit him was just doing his job. He didn't decide to add the extra one. Someone earlier in the chain did that. Oh, so says the Gemara, Ella Amar of Simi min Arda, the Ta'adaina Gufe. The Dayan is the one who made the mistake, and the Dayan is the one that we're questioning about whether or not he's obligated to go to Bezdin. So therefore, no kasha, no problem in regards to that case. Let's learn one more case. Meisve, 6 lines into the wide lines. Hazorek esaven l'rshus harabin v'harag. Let's say that a person takes a rock and they throw it into a public domain and they kill. Hareza gola, that's considered a shogeg, and they have to go into galus. Sorry, gentlemen, my apologies. The hacha the shogeg karav lemezid. But why is it that if a person throws a rock into a public domain, why is that regular shogeg? You threw a rock into a public thoroughfare. Says the Gemara, the shogeg karav lemezid who the boile asuki adaited b'rshus rabim shchichi inchi. What are you doing? You can't throw a rock into a public place. Why are we saying Vikatani Hareze Gola? We should be, in that case, we should be in the scenario of Shogeg Karav Lemezid. So the Gemara says, Amar of Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, no, Besoser is Koslo. He didn't throw the rock, he was taking down his wall, a rock hit somebody. Good. But he still, when you're taking down your wall, and your wall is the threshold between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim, you got to be careful. Says the Gemara, oh, no, Besoser B'layla. He was doing it at night. There weren't a lot of people in Rishus HaRabim. Doesn't matter. B'layla nami, B'layune. You still should look before you take down your wall, create an avalanche in Rishus HaRabim. No, Besoser is Kosla B'yom La'ashpa. He did it during the day and into a garbage dump, into a place where garbage went and a place where people used to go to the bathroom. So says the Gemara, 2/3, 3/4 of the way down, Hai Ashpa, Heichi Dami. What's the case of this garbage dump? If people frequent that place during the day, so then you're a mazid, and then pashut, you're not going to go into galus because you're a murderer. However, if nobody's there, if nobody ever goes there, then anusu, then there should be no assertion that you've done anything wrong. Amar Rav Papa, lo tzricha ela be'ashbaha asui li panos belayla, ve'ena asui li panos bayom. It's a garbage place. It's a place where people go to the bathroom, but it's really only meant for people to go to the bathroom at night and not during the day. Vika demikru v'yasif. However, it happened to be in this case that during the day someone was going to the bathroom when you took down your house. And says the Gemara, amazed lo have. You're not really amazed because the ha'ena asui li panos bayom. It's not a regular place that people go to the bathroom during the day. But anus nami lohabe, but you're also not a regular anus, dehacha ika demikri v'yasiv, because over here you should have looked and seen if anyone was there. So we're kind of in the middle, and therefore here too, there's no kasha of shogeg karuv lemezid. We're going to stop right here at Rav Papa, about 8 to 10 lines before the bottom of Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Emir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night at that point. Wishing you all a beautiful night.